Welcome to the Food Allergy Lifestyle Summit, where we are talking all things how to live well with our dietary restrictions, our food sensitivities or allergies, and how to get used to living this way, cooking this way. And I'm so excited about the person I'm talking to today, Erika, who is the founder and editor of GFF Magazine. It is a gorgeous magazine that stands for Good Food Forever, but it also stands for Gluten-Free Forever, because just because it's gluten-free doesn't mean it doesn't have to be good food as well. She is a traveler, a culinary writer, a mother, and passionate about great food. Welcome, Erika. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thanks, Andrea. I'm really happy to be here too.
So, how did it come about that you created this gorgeous magazine? I know that there's a story behind that. You have your own health journey yourself, which is why you're so passionate about this topic. Tell us about your kind of health journey.
Sure. So I was a food critic and a food and travel writer for maybe 10 years with magazines like InStyle and Travel and Leisure and Bon Appetit. And I ate everything. I grew up in San Francisco. My mom was a foodie before the term existed. I was dragged to every restaurant and cooking class of all time. And she was really passionate about food. So she cooked at home too. So that food just became my career. And I just, I'm not a snacker, I'm an eater. So I would just go out and eat, wherever I was reviewing restaurants or whatever. It was just, wonderful. And I loved it. And then I guess I was about 30 and I went through a stressful period in my life. I was working for a .com during the boom and bust. And suddenly I gained 15 pounds. It seemed like overnight. My skin and my hair looked terrible. And it was so contrary to my very resilient self before. I just couldn't figure out what was going on. So I did an elimination diet for 3 weeks, which basically brought me down to raw fruits and vegetables and seeds and oils. And then I slowly started adding things back into my diet and immediately saw that gluten really didn't agree with me anymore. So something had triggered a problem for me in my autoimmune system. And I just thought, well, I'm just going to stop eating it. So, and that's easier said than done for some, but it was easy for me because I live in Northern California, San Francisco, where farm to table has always been sort of the trend, and really farm to table is gluten-free, same thing pretty much. So, and I cook, so it wasn't a big challenge for me. And then when I would go out and review restaurants, I wouldn't even mention it. There's just so much to order that was gluten-free. It was very easy for me. So that was 20 years ago. I didn't even think about starting a magazine. I didn't even talk about it because nobody was talking about gluten-free. I didn't know there was a community. I wasn't looking for gluten-free bread or cookies. I was just going about my business and probably eating more ice cream. But then as my career went on and I got, the romance of magazines, I love the creativity of them and the beauty of them and the celebration of food. And the industry was moving away from that, and my career was moving away from that. I was getting more into online.com kind of, e-commerce stuff, and I felt I missed the passion, honestly. And then people started talking about, because gluten-free became a thing, people started talking about how, how bad it was. And I was offended. I was like, what do you mean? There's nothing bad about it. Gluten-free is farm to table, top, food trend in the world. Same thing. Why is one? And I know that it's because some of the baked goods taste like cardboard and they have terrible texture. But I also knew, because, my career as a food journalist, I think my superpower is finding excellence and celebrating it and sharing it with others, right? So I just thought, I think I just need to make a magazine that shows how delicious gluten-free can be if you have the right recipes or you know which products to buy. Because there are a lot of products you don't want to buy too, right?
Yep.
So, even bread, right? Something as simple as bread. There's some fantastic gluten-free breads, and there's some that are terrible and they're expensive. So I just sort of felt like I wanted to share with the world, I guess, what I was finding and continue to find more. So that's how it started. And then I kick-started it. I fundraised to, because, I'm like a team of one. So I fundraised to get things started, and had a couple of great partners that helped me get it off the ground. And then we were off and running. And that was 6 years ago.
Yeah, the Kickstarter could not have been easy. I mean, that was probably a big amount of money you had to put together. So clearly you had a passion to get this done. You had some experience in the industry because you had worked with magazines before, but like, what was that process like?
The Kickstarter
The
campaign was by far
Kickstarter,
the hardest
yeah.
thing I've ever done. If I had known, I literally was curled up in a ball crying on the floor because I was so naive. I thought, if you build it, they're going to come. And then the minute I put it up there, I was like, oh, no one even knows about this. Like, they're busy doing their life. And my job was going to have to be, the way I described it was, because we raised $94,000 in 30 days. And
Wow.
I also, the day after I started the campaign, found out that most people hire companies to launch an entire campaign for them, and they have a massive strategy, and there's like, it's all smoke and mirrors, or they've already figured out how they're going to earn the money before they get there. That was not me. I was just, but anyway, I describe it as filling a bathtub one green pea at a time. That's what that 30 days was. And it's still probably the hardest thing I've ever done. Yeah.
Wow. But you've created something so incredible. I actually have a couple of the magazines right here because I love cooking. I love looking for inspiration. And your recipes, the contributors, the pictures are incredible. I mean, this one I have, earmarked myself because I can't wait to do that myself. And I'll tell you, as someone who's constantly looking at recipes, that they're so well written that I can tell that if I give this to someone else who doesn't have a culinary degree like me and ask them, like, here, this is a great recipe, I know it's going to work for them.
You are
So
right. Thank you.
yeah, it's something that is really of value out there when it comes to recipe writing. So tell me, when you are picking
Yeah.
content for these, like what's the criteria that goes in that?
Right. Good question. So that was a rhubarb upside down cake that you did,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really easy. Um, so when I was writing for InStyle, I did their entertaining guides for 6 years, and one of my jobs was to take chef recipes and make them accessible to the home cook, which is really a joke because chefs cook, they cook in batches for many people, and it's like having to translate a foreign language. They also make a lot of assumptions because they have innate knowledge of what you should be doing. So they may not even say stir because, they know they should stir. But so anyway, I learned how to really think about how to make recipes work for people when they get them into their own kitchen and I'm not standing next to them saying, don't forget to stir, But so the criteria for me, there's so many blogs out there with so many recipes, and I find it really overwhelming to try to figure out what am I supposed to cook. So my job, the way I decided, was that I wanted to be the curator of all things great gluten-free for the reader, so that they don't have to try to figure out, if a recipe is good or not by looking at it online and trying to decode it, because there are a lot of people who can take really beautiful photographs, but that doesn't mean the recipe is going to be good. Or maybe it's just okay. Maybe it's an okay recipe. But I don't want okay recipes. Even when I'm just making dinner for tonight, I want recipes that are epic, and that, and my criteria became, would I make this again? Because it has to be really something for you to think like, wow, like for you to even remember a recipe, because we're so inundated with information at all times, that to reminisce a recipe, I think is a true stamp of genuine excellence. So that was my criteria. That was part of it. Most of the recipes are cooked with whole ingredients because I believe in that, and because it tastes amazing. It's more affordable. It's easy. It's empowering. And of course, baking is a different deal because you've got to work with some flours of some sort. Um, but yeah, it needs to be great. It needs to be accessible. It needs to be primarily made with ingredients you're familiar with or have access to. Um, yeah, but I wanted people every time they make a recipe from GFF to think that's one of the best recipes I've ever had. Awesome.
And not necessarily because, oh, that's the gluten-free version of the best recipe I've
Yeah.
ever had.
No, we don't do that. Like ever. That doesn't count. And it's sort of absurd too, because in truth, uh, there's nothing. Okay, there are probably two things, and I wouldn't even publish like I'm not going to do a good for gluten-free recipe. So you're not going to find a croissant recipe on gffmag.com. That's
Mm,
not going to happen, because if it's not as good or better, then why bother? You know, there's got to be something that's more satisfying than a mediocre croissant. you know, um, but we've done, and I will say that one of the features in the magazine was always trying to find like that unicorn recipe for something you can't make, and maybe you're not going to do it every day because it's a little challenging, like wonton soup, for example. So I have a recipe on GFF Mag for how to make wonton soup or wonton skin. So you can make fried wontons, you can make wonton soup, fried calamari, donuts, like all the stuff that you dream about that you miss. Most of those things you can find, but the everyday cooking is everyday cooking. It's what am I going to make for dinner tonight? That's kind of the big problem I want to solve. Or, oh my gosh, there's a wall of gluten-free breads. Which one should I buy? I want you to not have to think twice about it, because I've tried them all and I can tell you the ones that are worth the money.
yeah. I think that your magazine proves the point of that gluten-free food is just cooking regular food. A lot of people think like, oh, I have no idea what to do. I have no idea. Like, you're telling me I can't eat gluten or dairy or whatever it is. What am I going to make? The
Yeah.
truth is, it's just real food. It's real meat. It's real potatoes. It's real vegetables.
Right. People are like, rice is gluten free. Like, yes, yes, it
Yeah.
is. I mean, you're just going to have to stay away from a few things.
Yeah.
And I mean, and I think where it gets tricky for people, and I think this is why it's such a challenge um, for a lot of consumers today, is a lot of people don't cook from scratch. So then
Mm.
you have to know how to read labels, and you need to identify all the gazillion little ingredients that contain gluten that you might not know about, like soy sauce, or if you're going to a restaurant and it has romesco or sauce, so you just don't know. So you have to become a little bit of a detective as well. So, and I try to address that too with articles about that, and about traveling and how to, what's great where. We have city guides, mostly in the US, but some international too. Um, but for me, it was really, the magazine it was always a celebration. It's not about what you can't do or illness, or, there are other sources for learning about celiac disease and gluten intolerance and science and medicine. I wanted this to be just a pure celebration of fantastic food that happens to be gluten free, but nobody would even know.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So you just mentioned travel, and I know that you travel, you've been a travel writer, and then you just said, you do some travel in the magazine. What is it like for you to travel and eating out in other countries? How do you navigate that?
It's hard sometimes. There's some countries are better than others, especially because there's some countries that have a lot of naturally gluten-free cuisine already.
Hmm.
But there's, when there's language barrier, it's always harder too. So what is it like for me? And my daughter's gluten-free too. So, she has to be. When she was 3, I didn't know she was going to have to be gluten-free. I was hoping she wouldn't. And her grandmother had celiac disease also. But she one day I looked at her and she had this huge red ring around her mouth. It looked like she had been licking her lips so much that they were raw, but I knew she hadn't been licking her lips, and I was like, oh, you can't eat gluten anymore. Now, mind you, that was not like a deep medical diagnosis. So I figured, let's try. Let's just stop feeding her gluten. The minute gluten was gone, she didn't have that anymore. And then, a year later, I tried again, came right back. So we're like, okay. So anyway, So she has to be gluten-free when we travel as well. And, there are lots of apps out there that share information now. There are ways to get little cards that you can print out that communicate, in the language that you're going to, that you are allergic to gluten, you can't eat it, and also over the past 20 years, the awareness in general has elevated so much because people are intolerant all over the world in record numbers. And I have my own beliefs as to why that is, but the awareness is better. But people are still, I mean, even here in San Francisco, I'll ask a waiter, you can tell if your waiter's truly knowledgeable or not, right? So you still have to be your own advocate. But I've found it to be pretty navigable, and certainly in grocery stores. They're actually, Europe is exceptional for their gluten-free selection in grocery stores. So, if you're not feeling safe to go out and eat, you can buy lots of things that will keep you going. But I
Oh,
do go
that's
out and eat a
great.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great tip, because I know a lot of some of the very first gluten-free products like Char, and
Yeah.
can't remember the other ones. They came from the UK. Like those were the first ones
Yeah.
that were showing up in the marketplace here.
Yeah. Char is everywhere in Europe, and they have a shockingly large selection of products. So like I was in Ireland last summer, and I'd never seen so many Char products. Like there's a lot of stuff we don't even get here that they have over there. And I was in Italy, and there were, I went to restaurants that were exclusively gluten-free, where they were making handmade pastas every day. And we were in Greece, where everything's, caught and, it's grilled mostly, seafood. And then Greek salads, I can live on those as long as, they don't put any of those little, sometimes they make some sort of a spelty kind of crouton thing. So you just make sure they don't do that. So it's easy. It can be easy. You just have to ask, and you have to
Yeah.
advocate, and then you have to be suspicious when something seems like you're like, really, is that gluten-free? You need to know.
So then ask some questions.
Yeah.
You actually said countries I was surprised at, because my first thought would be, well, any country where their cooking is kind of rice-based, right? Some of
Mm-hmm.
the Asian ones, I think,
Like Thailand.
right, Thailand would be an easy one to go to. So when I'm thinking about going and eating at a restaurant, I know like, okay, Asian is usually a better bet for me than Italian. But you just mentioned Italy.
Well,
So,
not Chinese though, because the soy sauce is everywhere, right?
right, except for the soy sauce, right?
Yeah. Well, Europe, they're very, very conscientious there. They really are. And there are lots of exclusive gluten-free restaurants. I found them in every city that I went to. Some places are better than others. Spain's not great, honestly,
Mhm.
for that. However, wait, I take that back. Spain's great, and Portugal is not great, which is funny because they're right next to each other. But Spain, everywhere I went, if I said I was gluten-free, they didn't even ask. They just showed up with gluten-free bread that was individually wrapped, so that it was celiac safe. Like those guys have it down completely. And they have a ton of bread in their normal diet. Just think about tapas. It's like everything's on bread. But, and I've been through Thailand a lot. We went to Laos. That was fine. There's a communication issue there, and the culture often likes to say yes and be, friendly and helpful. So you have to make sure you're really talking to somebody who's not saying yes to you just because they don't want to disappoint you. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, that's a really good travel pointer right there.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
you think about like taxi drivers. Do you know where you're going? Mm-hmm. And then you end up like 45 minutes somewhere in the wrong direction. Um,
Yeah.
but I did have good, you're right. The cuisine in general in Thailand, they don't use wheat flour most of the time. There's a few things where they do, but not in any of the stir fries. So you can get away with a lot there.
Yeah. So just
Um,
knowing something like that in those kind of cuisines can be helpful.
yes. Yeah. And, I mean, frankly, things like Hawaii is incredible. And that's more local, but, and Mexican food,
Hmm. Yep.
there's a lot of gluten. It's easy, but, you have to be careful, depending on if you're celiac, you have to be extra careful. Um,
Right.
and then there's tools that are out there like NEMA. They're not a sure thing because, you could test one piece of it and the other side of it may have gluten, right? There's no
Hmm.
sure thing about exactly is every single thing not cross-contaminated somehow. But I think it's pretty easy to identify restaurants and places that are thoughtful and have made an effort. And the internet really helps because there are people like me who travel, tell people about it, right? So, when I come back, I'm like, oh my gosh, you got to go to this place because they completely know how to handle a gluten, really celiac safe experience. So yeah, whenever I travel, I do food roundups and restaurant roundups. And then sometimes, and this is so I develop some of the recipes that we feature. I find really exceptional chefs that I love to work with, but often I'll go out to eat and I'll have something that is so amazing. I'll say, can I have the recipe? And, that could happen with something. It did happen in Amsterdam, actually. For a fantastic little almond cake dessert. And they'll give it to me. And then I go home and I test it and refine it if I need to. And then I publish it because, they're wonderful. Some of the greatest chefs in the world are making gluten-free food every day without even knowing it. So, when I get my hands on it, I just want to share it.
That's great. Yeah. So that's why resources like this online are so, so good to have.
Yeah.
So you mentioned your daughter, and so similar to her, with like you noticed something was happening with her health, that something was popping up on her face,
Yes.
that you just kind of got curious. And I'm sure that happened because you went through it yourself. You had some symptoms, you tried out food and taking things in and out, saw what happened, so that you
Yeah.
kind of intuitively knew like to try that with her.
Yes. Yeah. So my mom was like kind of a nouveau hippie, and I was raised just to recognize that what you put in your body matters and really, really affects everything about you, and how you feel and how your body functions and all that stuff. So the first thing I thought of for myself too is like, what am I putting in my body that's not working for me? And what is she doing? And it's interesting now. I was just reading some literature the other day about uh, inflammation, which you get when you're eating foods that don't work with your body, is being really identified as a massive trigger for things like anxiety and depression too. And a lot of neurological issues where people are, it's mood disorders, but it's triggered by food, which makes perfect sense to me because I know if I eat nothing but cookies for a few days, which happens from time to time, I feel sad. I don't feel lively. I feel bad about myself. And then I think energetically, I think I'm also like, so yeah. So the first thing I turn to is like, what am I eating? And I think, I started with gluten, and then I started noticing other things that triggered adverse reactions for me too. So I just try to be mindful. The more you pay attention to how you feel, the more you can help direct how you feel.
Mm-hmm. So
right?
have you ever gone for any like tests, any genetic testing or some of the food allergy tests?
Yeah, I have. And I did it 20 years ago, and they were pretty lame, those
Yeah,
tests.
not
I
as
did,
good as
yeah.
they are today.
Yeah, they weren't. And I didn't want to go get my stomach lining tested. And then I stopped eating gluten. So, you have to eat gluten to test positive for being, having reactions to gluten. So I don't want to eat gluten because it makes me feel terrible. So I just, I don't do it,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I
That
can see it.
gluten
The second I
challenge.
eat gluten, I get a rash right across my face. One time, and it only happened once, thank gosh. But early on, I went to a restaurant, and I was still being a food critic, and somebody's like, "I just made this fantastic sourdough bread," which was like, I grew up in San Francisco. I lived on sourdough bread, and it's organic. It's the fermentation gets rid of the gluten. I'm like, okay, sounds great. I took a bite out of it, and it was the craziest thing. I felt my skin burning from the inside out. And I went to the bathroom, and I had a line like this down my face, and it peeled like 30 layers of skin deep. It was weird. And I was like, okay, like how many times do I need to figure this out that it doesn't really work for me? But in truth, I feel so good not eating. The majority of foods that contain gluten are mostly, they're processed foods, right? They're things that I don't need to eat. And there is an importance of getting fiber that you don't get from, when you're eating a gluten-free diet. So I look at, how do I do that in other ways? And the answer is, if you eat a whole bunch of really delicious, greens and, some beans every now and then, it's not so hard, it's pretty easy.
Yeah, I love your attitude about this, that you can have some foods that you're sensitive to, whatever, they don't work for you, and you can still love travel, love the food you're eating, still cook with joy, still, still just enjoy life without it being all about deprivation.
Oh, I scratch my head that people, and I understand why it's hard to change, right? If you're used to making, I don't know, frozen pizzas for dinner every night, or even 3 nights or 1 night a week, and then suddenly, and living on sandwiches, then suddenly, like, how do I change? Change is hard. But the answer to that is, once you figure it out, it's not hard. There's nothing hard about it. And you don't have to compromise anything. It's, you just reach for something different than you would reach for otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
I will say, though, I have family in South Carolina, not in Charleston, like but near Columbia. And it is not as easy, it is not. So I think it's really important to learn some fundamentals of cooking, because you may not be able to get epic brownies in certain parts of the country, and you want them, and there's no reason why you shouldn't have them. So you just need to know how to cook them.
Yeah, we are very lucky being in the Bay Area. You're in San Francisco, I'm south of San Francisco. We have 3 incredible bakeries that I can think of right off the top of my head in this area that are making really great breads. But yeah, and that's not like that in every part of the country. So
No.
people just arming themselves with the ability to cook and plan ahead is really powerful.
Yeah. And to
Um,
be honest with you shouldn't be eating all baked goods anyway. Like, that's, that's one part of your diet. So, you need, learn how to steam some broccoli and make a quick chicken piccata, and start there, because it's
yeah.
really amazing. And then you'll be inspired to do more.
That's true. I can make an amazing chocolate cake that's gluten-free, dairy-free. I make a really amazing carrot cake and a zucchini bread. I do not make them every day. They are not in my house because that's just not how I want to eat. It doesn't make me feel good, even if it's gluten-free. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I would, if it were in my fridge, I'd eat it every day. So there's there's that too.
yeah. Yeah.
But
So the magazine right now is no longer available in print. I have a couple print versions
yeah.
myself. So it's available online, correct?
Yes. Yeah. A year ago, I decided to take it digital, because the magazine, we call it a magazine, and it is a magazine, but it's really a cookbook. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I have such beautiful photographs and fantastic recipes is because I don't cram information into the pages between advertisements. Like, if I have I've gotten some of the most exceptional photographers around the world to want to work with me because I showcase their work, because it's beautiful. And, what makes you want to cook more than looking at a yummy food photo? So, but there are 50 recipes in each issue, and 18 issues later, I was just thinking, like, the world is going digital, and the romance of the pages are fantastic, and people do keep the magazines and put them on their coffee table because they look like art, and they're pretty, and they're thick pages, they're collectible for sure, and people do keep them and use them as cookbooks. But if you've been collecting my magazines for 18 issues and you're figuring out, hey, where's that chicken paillard? It's easy to just go online and do one search and get the recipe that you want. So, we have more than 1,000 really epic recipes that have been well tested, given the yes, I would make that again approval. I wanted to make it easier for people. So
Mm-hmm.
we've put all the recipes, all the travel guides, all the articles. We do a lot of product reviews too, and roundups, especially because if you're eating bread, like, I might have a specific favorite. There are several fantastic breads out there now, but they're not all available all over the country. So I wanted to make sure that everyone, wherever they were, could find something on the list that was actually worth buying and enjoying. So we have product roundups a lot. Or if I find something that, it's worth buying and shipping because it's so ridiculously amazing, we'll recommend that stuff too. But I did find that ultimately it turned, I was resistant to it, and then I did it and I was like, oh my God, this is so much easier. I mean, it's a real wealth of information. So everything is at your fingertips now where it wasn't before.
Yeah. So people can go in and basically, like, it's buying a subscription where they get all the new content as it comes out. But as you said to me, you also have the back issues, those 18 editions or whatever's still available. You have those back issues for purchase as well.
Yeah, so if you go to gffmag.com, you can browse the site. There's plenty of content you can get to, and then at some point, sort of like at the New York Times, you'll hit a paywall. You can sign up for, and you can get 2 free weeks to try it out, see if you like it, download as many recipes as you want, try whatever you want, and then you can either cancel or you can subscribe, and that would be either monthly for less than a cost of a latte, or annually for $30. And then you'll get an email every week with new information about what's new on the site, new recipes or old recipes that you should rethink about because it's Christmas, and the gluten-free, dairy-free, bûche de Noël is unparalleled. It really is. So, you might want to remember that that's there. And then the old issues, that they're cookbooks, so they're timeless. They're not meant to, they were meant to be sort of evergreen. You can order those if you want to send them as a gift. You can buy a bunch. Even if you don't send them as a gift, if you buy a bunch, I always gift wrap them and send them with a thank you, because everything that I do on gffmag.com and GFF Magazine is from the heart, and we're not a group of high paid people who are just trying to make a buck by selling as much ad space. Like, we don't do that. This is all about love and sharing passion and helping people to have a better life, so yeah, so that's what we do. That you'll get that personal touch in there, but we also ask that you contribute to supporting my ability to test recipes and get great photographers and continue to make new wonderful recipes for you.
Yeah, absolutely. $30 a year is not a lot for this kind of amazing content. And if you're cooking and eating this way, you want to feel like you can trust your recipes that you're going to use. And I know that Erika has such a high standard, as you guys heard earlier, for what she puts in her in the cookbook. I'm going to call it a cookbook, in
Yeah.
her magazine, online, all of that, because she cares so much. And I think that's what's really powerful about someone like you. You have a story behind why you're putting this content out there. It's your own personal health story. It's how you stay feeling good. You care so much about sharing all of this with other people. So I definitely always recommend that to people, that when you're on a healing journey and you're looking for recipe resources, look for someone like Erika, who has her own personal story, her connection, why she cares about this content so much. And she happens to have such a high excellence in making sure they're written well. Any recipe that I've done out of the magazines always comes out. It always comes out the way that I expect it to, or the way the instructions, so you can trust them. So you can go on the website, you can purchase the subscription so that you get the new content. You can also go to gffmag.com and just sign up for the newsletter. Like, get to know the content that way. Sign up for the newsletter and you'll get content there if you feel like you want to get to know it before you purchase, and follow them on Instagram. I love seeing the GFF show up in my newsfeed. I'm like, ooh, what kind of inspiration am I going to get today for something I want to go cook? And we eat with our eyes. So I see a picture and go, oh, wow, that just pulls me right in. And if I'm cooking for myself or cooking for other people gluten-free, I know I don't have to change anything. I don't have to figure out, oh, what am I going to adjust? Am I going to switch the flours? Like, it's right there and it's all ready for me. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
So for the people that are watching us right now and are so inspired to give this a try, they're like, oh, I've been scared of gluten-free cooking, or I don't know, or it seems hard, whatever it is, or they're hearing a little bit of themselves in your story, like, where would you tell them to start? Like maybe 2 or 3 things, like where would you tell them to just get started?
Yeah. Well, one thing I love and I do is I follow, if you go on Facebook, there are lots of celiac and gluten-free groups. They're a great place to follow and ask questions, because people, anyone in the community is as passionate as you are, passionate as you or I are. And you can get a lot of questions answered there, whether you're asking like, does this have gluten in it, or what kind of cookies should I buy, or just has anyone been to Maui? I mean, it's a great place to get support too, even if you want to complain that like you were invited over to your family's Thanksgiving dinner and they know you're celiac and they didn't provide you any food. Like there's a lot of compassion there, and I think that's really helpful. You just need a support system. I would say also get a few simple recipes under your belt that you feel confident that you can make. It's important to be able to know how to provide for yourself, and especially to satisfy yourself, because it is no fun to eat and feel like you just didn't get to enjoy yourself like everybody else, And I think in the same vein, knowing great products is along that same line, right? If let's say you don't want to bake a cake, what's a good cake mix to buy? So you can find those things on gffmag.com too. We do review tons of products just for that reason, and I try really hard to focus on the ones that are real necessities for people, because I cook a lot and I don't make my own crackers. I mean, it's very rare for me to do that. I have a few recipes for crackers, but mostly I'm buying crackers, and I want you to be able to buy good crackers too. um let's see what else. I think that's a good place to start, and know that um you can eat incredible food. You don't have to miss out on anything. There's, croissants aside, you can pretty much have, an equivalent or better of anything out there. Although I will say, I do know there's some phyllo dough coming out onto the market this year, and there's some puff pastry. So I'm not sure they make croissants quite like but you can have good puff pastry. Everything, everyone's making everything. It's happening.
Yeah, that's a good point. The products out there are changing. There didn't used to be good crackers. There didn't
Yeah,
used to be great bread, all of that.
bagels.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So that's a great place to end, of just food can still be really delicious and satisfying. And there's so many resources out there for us to learn from, to get cooking in our kitchens, and what to shop for in the stores, especially, and when we travel too, and
yeah,
when you're having dinner parties. Yeah, it's
right.
all out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Erika, thank you so much. This has been a really great conversation. I know the people that are watching us have learned a lot. I really hope they're excited to get in the kitchen and just have some fun. Try some things in the kitchen, try out some new recipes. It's all really possible. It just might be a little different than what you're used to doing before. That doesn't mean that it won't turn out really great. So for everyone out there watching, I'm so glad you joined us today, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Andrea. Have me back anytime. I love chatting with you.
Absolutely. We could talk all day. All right. Bye, you guys.
Bye.